Hello and welcome everyone to the first video of many. This video will be primarily to focus on what talents a Warlock should be running in Mythic Plus. I know not everyone can participate in this video because not everyone plays Warlock, but in the future, videos will be on broader topics that everyone can enjoy. Now, for this, you need to make sure you're playing Affliction spec. I know not everyone wants to play Affliction, but Affliction is a lot stronger in Mythic Plus than every other Warlock spec. Personally, I main Destruction in raiding, and will continue to do so, but I main Affliction in Mythic Plus. So first, you gotta look at your talents. What are your talents and what is going to be the best? Here I've put together a little graphic for what talents you should be looking into using in Mythic Plus. Red means you'll never take this, green means you'll take this in most cases, and orange means very special cases, usually only one, maybe two dungeons. On the first tier, you'll see that Haunt is red. Haunt is just always worse than Writhe in Agony or Malefic Grasp in every situation. Even in raiding, no one ever takes it. Writhe in Agony, you'll be taking the majority of the time, because the majority of the time, especially in higher Mythic Plus, whatever you personally would consider high is really going to be a situation where you have lots of ads up for a long enough period of time that it gets all the way to 15 stacks and stays at 15 stacks long enough. That's better than Malefic Grasp. Personally, I would only take Malefic Grasp for maybe Upper Karazhan with Tyrannical, maybe. Other than that, I generally will always use Writhe in Agony. On your second row, you'll see Contagion and Empowered Life Tap are both green. First, I'm going to talk about Absolute Corruption, though. It's orange because Absolute Corruption is only ever used in Seed of the Triumvirate. In Seed of the Triumvirate, it is incredibly strong, but everywhere else, it's just a little bit below Contagion and Empowered Life Tap. Empowered Life Tap is really, really good for when you use Sow the Seeds, which we'll get to in a moment. Sow the Seeds plus 10% damage to that already big AoE is huge, but Contagion can give you a lot of power into specific targets, into focused targets. Now, on 45, you'll see that I have green on Howl of Terror and Demonic Circle. Mortal Coil just really doesn't have that many applications and only fears one target, and can actually cause some issues. If you Mortal Coil something, and it just keeps running the wrong direction for 3 full seconds, it can run into another pack and just pull everything. Now, Demonic Circle, if you need mobility. Howl of Terror, if you need to maybe interrupt a big pack of imps, which you'll see in several dungeons. On the 60-point talents, you'll see that Phantom Singularity is red. Everywhere that Phantom Singularity would be used, you can either get more AoE out of Sow the Seeds, or with proper planning, Soul Harvest can just do more overall DPS. So Phantom Singularity really doesn't have a place in serious Mythic Plus. It just doesn't have enough of its own special utility or high damage. On 75, you'll see Demon Skin is orange. I will personally only use Demon Skin for maybe Court of Stars. In Court of Stars, Demon Skin can do some pretty good work. Personally, I don't really use Burning Rush all that much because either I can use Portal Pants to get around inside, and if we're outside, I can just use a mount. Dark Pact gives you a lot of survivability, so I generally will run with Dark Pact. You'll see in the next row, Grimoire of Service and Grimoire of Sacrifice, both red. It just goes the same with raiding. You always want Grimoire of Supremacy if you're running as Affliction. It's just so much better than the other two. The other two aren't terrible, they're not trash, but they're just not as good. And in the 100 talents, Siphon Life, kinda trash. Not really useful, especially because in Mythic Plus you're casting so much, you don't really have the open GCDs to put Siphon Life on things. Soul Conduit's gonna proc so much because you're using so many Soul Shards, and Death's Embrace, I took it off because I don't run with it. I don't run with it because I have a ring that gives me Death's Embrace if I want, so I can have Soul Conduit and Death's Embrace. What's the point of running a talent, permanently locking yourself into it, when you can just equip an item and get the talent yourself? Now that I've gone over the talents individually, I'd like to take just a few minutes to look over the 3 or 4 main talent setups that you'll be using in Mythic Plus. The first one I'm going to show you is Seat, just because that's what's playing in the background. This talent setup is what you want to use for Seat of the Triumvirate. You'll notice on the first level, you've got Writhe in Agony. You've got a lot of things here, a lot of big trash packs. Writhe in Agony is going to do more overall than Malefic Grasp. I mean, you'll do more on this boss, and it'll feel better if you run Malefic Grasp, but overall in the dungeon, you'll get more out of Writhe and Agony. This here was the special case, Absolute Corruption. Because Absolute Corruption, you saw on this first boss, Absolute Corruption was really, really good on those adds. With the slow ring, with Absolute Corruption, a Warlock can basically solo the little adds and trivialize the entire portion of the fight that revolves around the adds. On the second boss, it's a 3-target council fight, and you'll notice if you look at raid bosses that have 2 or 3 target council fights, everyone's using Absolute Corruption because Absolute Corruption is the best one for council fights, so it's better on the second boss. Third boss, again, you have these little adds spawning, and you can't all focus target them all down really fast. Absolute Corruption, put your corruptions on the tentacles on the third boss, they're going to do a lot of damage to the tentacles. So Absolute Corruption really works well in Seed of the Triumvirate, but nowhere else. I personally use Demonic Circle here because Demonic Circle on the third boss can really help with the pushback from the winds. And you're not really trying to fear anything. Halotera is not going to give you a huge boost to anything here. And anything you really want to interrupt is probably immune to fear. Mainly the big dudes, the wardens here. Now, I prefer Sow the Seeds here because you got a lot of trash. You want to move through it quick. Like, look at this whole area, full of trash. Now, obviously, I didn't pan up and view, but anyone who's been in Seat knows there's a lot of trash in Seat. And you're going to be pulling lots of little void discharges, lots of big packs of patrols. Sow the Seeds, much better, in my opinion, on the overall damage than Soul Harvest, but Soul Harvest will be useful on those annoying bosses. Bosses have been nerfed, though, so they're a little bit easier. Now, I personally run Dark Pact because you can mount up in this entire instance, so you don't really need Burning Rush. Now, of course, you only can ever choose Supremacy, so Grimoire of Supremacy, that's a done deal. And then, of course, I personally always go Soul Conduit, because I can always just equip the Execute Ring if I want to go ahead and execute something. The next set of talents to look at is the Sow the Seeds talent. This is your cookie cutter AoE spec. So obviously it has Writhe and Agony because you're all about that add damage. Empowered Life Tap to go with your Sow the Seeds to get maximum AoE power. I use this in the majority of my dungeons because my group, well, we like to pull big. And if your group likes to pull big, or if you're in a dungeon that just forces you to pull big, this is your talent setup. It is one of the most powerful AoE setups of any class anywhere in the game. It is incredibly powerful, slightly lower damage on bosses, and you don't really have any oomph for focusing one specific target down. But when you get to a huge pull like you see now, this is what you want. You just keep your Empowered Life Tap up 24/7, keep about 4 or 5 agonies on the target, and just mash Seed of Corruption. That is your spec. Now, of course, don't use Seed of Corruption if you don't have at least 4 targets. Swap back to Unstable Affliction, even in this spec. But for this spec, Sow the Seeds on all these huge trash packs that you know you want to pull. This spec is one of the most simple to play. It is almost a one-button spec. Once you have several agonies rolling to give you shards, it becomes a one-button spec. This here is the last spec that I'm going to go over in detail. There's one more that I'm going to lightly mention, but this right here is the last one I'm going to actually talk about for any extended period of time. This right here is the aptly referred to Sub-Rogue spec, because like a Sub-Rogue, you're going to do a little damage to all the things around you, and then a lot of damage to whatever you target. Now, you see Writhe and Agony, just like any other spec, you're going to probably go Writhe and Agony, because you're going to have lots of targets, and you're going to want your Agony stacking up to 15. Contagion, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have Unstable Affliction on every target, and then put all the excess shards into one target. That's your Sub-Rogue Eviscerate type target. So, Contagion, 15% extra damage to everything with UA on it. You want it running on as many targets at once, so as many targets are taking 15% extra damage as possible, but then everything else, all those UAs go right into that one main target. Because you have multiple targets, your Soul Harvest is going to last an extended period of time, and because you're dumping UAs, it's going to do a lot of damage. So that will definitely do a lot better when you have 3 targets, 2 targets, or even 1 target on bosses. And it's going to do comparable damage until you get to really big AoE packs where it can't even keep up with Sow the Seeds. When you have like 8+ targets, Sow the Seeds is going to start doing about double the damage. But overall, this can, at the end of a dungeon, just about keep up with Sow the Seeds on any dungeon. There's only a few where you absolutely have to take the AoE spec over this. So if this is the playstyle you want, definitely go with this spec. If you want to be spamming Unstable Affliction, especially if you're doing things where you don't have more than 5 or 6 targets at a time, this is a great spec to use. And I don't personally play it a lot, but there are Warlocks out there who stream, who have videos, where you can see this spec being put to good use. I do use it myself in Neltharion Slayer and Upper Karazhan. We're going to close out this video on the least commonly used spec. So it's very similar to both specs, but you are trading off one talent. You're either trading Empowered Life Tap for Contagion, or Soul Harvest for Sow the Seeds, however you want to see it. So this spec is for when it's a dungeon that you're really probably going to use the Soul Harvest spec for, but this time your group is pulling big, and you need Sow the Seeds for the crazy pulls they're going to do. Like, I use that in Neltharion Slayer with my group, because we pull all the trash mobs before the first boss, all the way down, all the way to the bridge, every little skitter, everything, and pull it all together in AoE. And then we do the same thing before the second boss. We do 2-3 pulls before the second boss, and then maybe 1 or 2 pulls before the third boss. So we're looking at huge trash packs, but still the majority of your time in that dungeon is going to be spent fighting the absurdly long bosses in Neltharion Slayer. I have used it once or twice in Upper Karazhan, but that was because we did all of the worms at once. We took the entire room after the third boss and did it all at once in the hallway. And I actually had to run Sow the Seeds or we would wipe, because we had just enough AoE damage with Sow the Seeds to kill the worms before they exploded. Outside of that, I haven't really seen it used much, and I don't personally use it much outside of those 2 instances, but I have seen it used in good effect in Eye of Ashara, especially on Bolstering Week, when you can't really do the huge crab pull because you're just going to create a king crab with 13 billion health. So Sow the Seeds sort of loses its value in Eye of Ashara when you do that, or at least Empowered Life Tap Sow the Seeds, so you can go a little more into Contagion. But really, this is, apart from the seat spec, probably your least used spec. So let's end this with a quick recap. Use the talents you see on the screen right now only in Seed of the Triumvirate, and definitely use them in Seed of the Triumvirate. They are actually very good. Use these talents on screen now for big AoE, especially if your group is pulling a lot of packs together, especially if those packs are incredibly dangerous if they live too long. Use this next set of talents if you really need to focus something down, or you need boss damage, or there just aren't a lot of huge trash packs in the dungeon in question. And last but not least, only use this talent setup you see right now if you're in a dungeon where you'd use the talents shown before with Soul Harvest, but your group's going to be making some pretty big pulls. And that just about does it. That's all you really need to know about talents in Mythic Plus. You'll have to go and see what your group runs before you make any decisions when it comes to certain dungeons. You need to know how much your personal group is going to pull. Other than that, that's all for now. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you next time.